Hi all. So hi Toothy. Congrats on getting the first redeem. Good job. Oh, no students today, just training. Well, I hope it's quite relaxed. Nothing too stressful. We're just going to wait for a bit for people to trickle in. Yeah, I hope you have a relaxed day. This is probably going to be a shorter stream because we did stream yesterday. But I really wanted to get back into this. It's a good story and I want to finish it in October. We want to get this done in October. We want the spookies, the horrid gothics. But yeah, I hope you're going to have a good day. I hope it goes well. Oh no. I I won't lie. I have had a few tech disasters like that before, where I just drop something and I go, "Well, it's happened. If it's broken, it's broken." I'm a bit of a butterfingers. I am quite clumsy sometimes. Although for some odd reason I'm really good at like balancing multiple plates and cups. Don't know why. But yeah, I wanted to get back into the story and finish it before Halloween, and it isn't a short story, so we really need to grind. We need to hustle. We need to get this. We need to get back into it. Oh, T seems to boot the laptop just fine. I'm sure this is good news. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure nothing has happened to it. I dropped my phones in the past many times. I'm sure it's okay. If tech isn't sturdy, it's not made for humans. Let's be real. Oh, it's been 5 minutes. I think we've given people enough time to trickle in. I I am quite eager. I won't lie. Let's hop on over to game capture. Oh right, I put myself over here because yesterday when we were playing Phasmo, let me just move myself back over. There was a potato I found, and it had a little face on it, but it only showed in like that bottom right corner when I held it, so we had to keep an eye on him. Obviously. You get it, you understand. At some point I need to, you see those boxes on the bottom? I need to set those up properly. That is my next thing on the tech list. But other than that, I'm working on the December event stuff and the birthday stream stuff. I haven't decided on what I'll be playing for the birthday stream, but I think it'll be fun. I have high hopes. Shall we get into it, babes? Shall we get into it? Into the horrible gothics. We'll load right where we were just travelling through the marshes and listening to horrid stories about people dying in them. And what came of this tragedy? Did his family finally believe in Osbert's visions? The villagers too. Aye, they did. In fits and starts, they began to see the merit in young Osbert's predictions. But this, I fear, did the young lad more harm than good. Fancying his visions as something fiendish, brought about by the devil, rather than our Lord on high, amen, they began to fear him. This fear soon turned to outright hostility when Osbert successfully predicted yet another death, and soon the poor lad was driven clear from the village. And what of Osbert? What fate befell him? Well, he could hardly go back to Beeston. Not after rousing the suspicions of his fellow villagers. They would have him stoned to death if given the chance. They thought him a messenger of Beelzebub. So where did he live? How did he live? What did he do? Well, what does that think? The marsh is named after Osbert for a reason. Then Letitia drew in a breath and brow furrowed, looked once more about the moors. The moors were uneven with hillocks, the tall grass scrubby and strewn with trees. These trees varied greatly in appearance, some being tall and stately, while others were sad, hunchbacked affairs, bent double like old men. Wildflowers were embedded among the grass, yet the day was too overcast and cloudy to properly showcase their arresting colours. Their crimsons and azure rendered in pale ghostly pastels. There was a cool breeze which blew through the trees and through the tall grass, so the terrain itself seemed to tremble. There was something haunting about the moors and how very vast they were, which made Letitia's stomach clench. She did not much fancy wandering about the moors on her own, far from the paths beaten through the gorse and the grass by the wheels of passing carriages. Fun fact, we have a pretty heinous gorse infestation in our country. It's an invasive species and it's horrific. And if it occurs on your farmland, legally you have to kill it. But a lot of people just don't, and it's not very reported on when people don't do it. So it's just what we live with. Granted, it is very hard to kill gorse. Dirty thing. The moors seemed to expand outwards indefinitely, so dense with greenery that the rest of the world, and indeed all of polite society, seemed to have melted away. York, with its cobblestone streets and its sensible wrought-iron lamps, seemed to inhabit a different world to that Gerard was buoying her through. The wild, untamed seclusion of the natural world left to run riot. There were parks in London, of course, great vast grasslands, but they were tended to by human hands, the borders of the flower beds trimmed to perfection, until they sat just so in their environment. The moors were anything but. They were nothing at all like anything Letitia had ever before witnessed, not in all her 24 years. They were unnerving. Osbert, he didn't live in the marshes, did he? Letitia ventured this possibility forth, in little more than a soft, constrained whisper. But even as a whisper, Gerard heard it. His ears must have been sharp, Letitia thought, to detect the cadences of her voice, no matter how minute, above the sound of his horses in the mournful wind. Aye, he did. He lived in the moors in a mud hut of his own making from the age of 13. He had nowhere else to go, the poor beggar, being so young. if thou pardon my French, ma'am. Sometimes I forget myself. So during this time, bugger is considered like a swear word for the common folk. It's all right. I take no offence. So, Letitia's fingers curled in her lap, her shoulders taut and almost impossibly rigid. What became of Osbert, dwelling in the marshes as he did? Oh, by all accounts, our Osbert lived a long, healthy life. He was an old man when he passed in his 90s, or so it's said. There are many stories, of course. My Aunt Mabel had a slightly different spin on the life of Beeston's very own saint than my great dear mum, but they all agree on a few key points, namely, that Osbert was driven from his home young and grew old in the moorlands, among the marshes. He honed his skills as an apothecary, living out among the wilds, and soon became renowned, not just in Beeston but beyond, for his potions and tonics. He made a living tending to weary travellers and was quite contented. Or as contented as one can be, living in a mud hut out among the heath. And the visions? Did they stop? Not as far as I know, Mum. The visions remained a constant of his life until his eventual demise, which he, of course, predicted. Of course. Letitia sighed. It sounds rather grim, knowing when one's death is approaching, yet being unable to do anything to hinder it. Perhaps it is, aye. But I rather think that's what most lives are like. Aren't we all born knowing that we'll one day shuffle off this mortal coil? One doesn't need to receive visions to know at least that much. I suppose, but... Letitia glanced beyond the window, at the vast expanse of wild marshland which rolled on by, and frowned. Did anybody ever take stock of Osbert's visions? Aye, they did. At the tail end of his life, at least. They must have, else he never would have come to be regarded as a saint. But his older brother refused to believe him, as did the people of his village. He meant only to help them, yet his attempts were thwarted, scorned even. That's just how people are, Mum. Whatever the century, whether they be looking at the 1200s or the present day, we're an inherently cynical species. We don't trust other people. Maybe we've had our faith knocked out of us. That, I think, is what St. Osbert's tale is about. It's why my mum, God rest her heart, recited it to me as a lad when I was scarce old enough to walk. She wanted me to know the importance of placing my faith in others, and in God on high in particular. People might lie and cheat and steal, but he never does. I see, Letitia said after a small pause. Bowing her head, she softly said, her eyes affixed to her fingers, "That is the most illuminating tale. I shall keep it in mind." That'd be best to. The marshes are dangerous, like I said. There are no place for a young woman like thyself, or a middle-aged man like me, come to think of it. I've no desire to camp out here after dark like poor Osbert back in the day. No, sir, I do not. Thou can believe or disbelieve Osbert's tale if thou wants, 'tis no skin of my nose. But if thou takes anything away from it, I like it to be this. The marshes really are dangerous. For those who are unfamiliar with them, and even on occasions those who are, see to it that thou marks my words, unlike poor Osbert's older brother, if thou doesn't wish to end up like him. There's more than enough bodies lying at the bottom of these lakes, more than thou would think. The marshes may look peaceful, but they've claimed even any number of victims over the centuries. Don't let it claim thee next. It took another couple of hours, following Gerard's retelling of St. Osbert's legend, before the carriage arrived at the gates of Hatton Manor. During this last leg of their journey, an exhausted Letitia had begun to doze, her head resting against the side of the carriage, while the knot of tension in her shoulders slowly relaxed. She hadn't fallen into a deep slumber. She had been much too anxious for that. Yet she had drifted, dolorously, in fits and starts, between sleep and waking. The creaking of the carriage, however, as it came to a halt, and Gerald's exclamation of, "We're here, Mum! Look lively now! Miss Rye'll be upon you soon, and she can't stand sloppiness," all made Letitia start. Eyes wide, she sat up, smoothing the wrinkles which had bunched about the front of her skirt. Then, with Gerard's aid, quitted the carriage. Now outside and exposed once more to the elements, Letitia inhaled. The air smelled vegetal, of unkempt grass and dirt, and it blew coolly against her cheeks, prompting several strands more of her distressed hair to escape their chignon. There was a cold bitter bite to the wind, which made Letitia thankful for her gloves and her mantle. Despite her many layers, however, she shivered still. The weather itself was foreboding enough, and yet, goodness me, the sense of foreboding was soon trumpeted by the red brick edifice of Hatton Manor. The building towered before Letitia's eyes, large and imposing, surrounded on all quarters by the sprawling Yorkshire moors. The building had been constructed in the late 16th century by one Archibald Hatton, a self-made man who'd accrued wealth through foreign trade. The house had been passed down through the Hatton family from generation to generation. Each successor left their own mark upon the home, some adding new wings, while others knocked down and merged old rooms. After some 300 years, the house was scarcely recognisable as the tasteful yet humble abode Archibald had first constructed. Little of its original facade remained, and the house had rather expanded, the foundations groaning under the weight of these excess additions. The old roof had been completely removed, new windows fitted, and the chimneys had all been remodelled. The vast manor had 8 bedrooms, a billiards room, and a kitchen large enough one could lose themselves in it. The servants' quarters were located beneath the attic, in the draughtier parts of the house, and the cook prepared most of her master's meals with vegetables harvested from the garden outside. The garden was well tended to, and its borders burst tomato plants, lettuces, radishes, cucumbers, green beans and pumpkins during the summer and autumn months. Welcome in, Dodo. It's nice to see you. Hope you're doing well today. I'm trying to finish Salomes Kiss before the end of the spooky season. We'll see if we can manage it. This is going to be a short stream though, probably 2.5 hours max, but we'll get some more streams in, don't you worry. I did have to take a short break because I was sick, and technically I'm still sick, but I'm better than I was. And I mean, that break was a whole week, so hey, I need to get back to it. The house's ancient walls were fringed with ivy. It draped about the building like a protective shroud, green and rich and verdant. When the ivy trembled in the breeze, the sound carried throughout the house, soft and low like a murmur. The house was isolated, and with its many dim, dingy windows, seemed inscrutable. Even at a glance, Letitia did not find it a hospitable kind of dwelling. It was nothing at all like the cosy, close-knit family home of the Mortimers, skinny and narrow, and pressed up intimately between a row of like terraces. Oh, that's okay, Dojo. You'll be happy to know that we have a YouTube channel with all the VODs, so you can catch up with everything I've been doing. So don't you worry. Oh, why isn't it? I don't have Stream Elements open. That's on me. Let me try that once more. Oh right, I don't have that one set up. That's on me. But yes, we do have the YouTube channel. It is on the About page of the channel. So you can catch all the other VODs. You can actually catch all the other VODs. It's okay. Do not stress. I know my time zone is so messy. It's an issue. I need to work out how I'm going to do that better. But thank you for popping in. It's nice to see you. Why did I think I had social set up? Tricked my brain, didn't I? Oh well. Hatton Manor instead, stuck out from the earth like a solitary tombstone. The only habitable place of dwelling for miles. Had Letitia choice, she would have turned and clambered back into Gerard's carriage. She had half a mind as she stood there, a lump forming in her throat, to retreat. Yet she knew, fingers clenched at her side, she could not do that. She had given up too much of her old life already, had cut it away in fact like the rotten bough of an aging tree. Now there was no going back. She had no option save to press on. That was how Letitia came to square her shoulders, her eyes narrowed, and adopting a confidence she did not truly feel, she stepped forth and let Hatton Manor swallow her. Letitia crossed the threshold of the stately home, feeling quite at a loss, despite her attempted cool. And the moment she did, she found herself set upon by an austere woman whose countenance was as inviting as a gargoyle's. The woman, who Letitia took to be Hatton's housekeeper, must have been waiting for her, for her features betrayed not the slightest trace of surprise upon seeing Letitia. Frowning, the woman raked her eyes over Letitia, then said in a voice every bit as commanding as her presence, "So I take it that you are Miss Reed?" "Yes, miss." "Yes, miss?" The housekeeper echoed Letitia's words, her narrowed eyebrows raised with unmistakable derision. "Is that all you have to say for yourself?" No, miss. I'm sorry, miss." Yeah, my the selected country on my Twitter is actually quite accurate. Unfortunately, I am well aware of the time zone mess. It's a problem. It's a problem. I would do more evening streams, but I live with family, and I mean, evening for me would be a lot better for people. But I have family members that do not appreciate my noise in the evenings. So I just don't have that option at the moment, unfortunately. Letitia's head drooped, her fingers clenching at the fabric of her dress. She dropped a curtsy, rendered clumsy with nerves, and said, "It is very nice to meet you." "Is it now?" The housekeeper clicked her tongue. "I wish I could say the same about you. Are all governesses as gormless as you are up in London?" Titia's cheeks pinked. "Not all of them, miss." "Then you are an exception." "I couldn't say." "Certainly your previous employer seemed to think so. She said you were exceptional. Her praise was so high, I fear my expectations soared with it. But... oh well, I should have expected as much, you being so young. You're looking at your shoes like a frightened child." Titia certainly felt like a frightened child. She was so overawed she could barely look the housekeeper, Miss Rye she presumed, in the eye. The sprawling exterior of Hatton Manor had been off-putting enough, but the interior seemed even more cavernous. Before her, across a vast expanse of teak floorboards and rich ruby-red carpet, was a grand staircase. "Oh, like geographically it's the furthest." "Oh, how interesting." Letitia had yet to see where that staircase led, or traverse the manor's many hallways, but she felt lost already. A young girl all over again, a long way removed from her home. Letitia's travelling case, which sat by her feet, was the only memento she had of her life in London. Everything else felt strange and foreign. Letitia was still in England. But the England Hatton Manor inhabited ran contrary to all she had ever known of England. It had been a long, long time since she had felt so very lost. I am Rowena Ree, by the way, though I am sure even you must know that much. I am the housekeeper at Hatton. I keep everything in order. All the maids answer to me. I dare say I know more about running the running of this place than the master does. And the mistress? Dead. Oh. That explained why Miss Ree had been the one to write the advertisement in the Morning Post, and why she had been the one to correspond with Letitia about her position. Letitia had wondered if Lady Langley had been negligent. Now she knew the truth. She had passed, and judging by Miss Ree's flat, unemotional tone, she had been dead for a while. I am the one who decided to take you on as Miss Langley's governess. If it weren't for me, you would not be standing here. Do try to show some gratitude." "I am very grateful, miss. Truly I am." "As you should be. Never forget that gratitude. I will never not be treated with anything other than the utmost respect." "Yes, miss. Of course, miss." "And while you stay at Hatton, do try to show some gumption. I gave you this job based on the strength of your previous employee's testimony, despite my misgivings. Do not let me down. This should go without saying, but I dislike being disappointed." "Hi, Jules. Hello, hello." "We have just arrived at Hatton Manor. We're being chewed out by the housekeeper." "I hope you're doing well today, Han." Yes, miss. I will do my best. I shan't disappoint you." "Very well." Miss Reed nodded her head. Her eyes continued to bore in Letitia, so hard and flinty it hurt. You're hungry, why aren't you eating? Eat food if hungry. Very simple. Letitia knew what that look meant. She had been in Hatton Manor for less than 5 minutes and she had already been found wanting. This was not necessarily through any fault of her own, however. She knew she would be deemed inadequate, no matter what she did or said. For Miss Reed had clearly deemed her an interloper. Oh no! Strangers downstairs! No! Strangers downstairs say you can't. Oh. How could they do that? Shouldn't be allowed. That sounds quite illegal. I think we should kick them out. Because how can they ever stop you from eating? Disgusting. Miss Reed's unflinching, uncompromising gaze made that readily apparent. I will arrange for one of the serving girls to take your bag. She can put it away in your room. Now come with me. Miss Reed turned on her heels before Letitia had a chance to respond. I will show you around the manor. We can talk while we walk. I will tell you everything you need to know about your new position and your newfound duties. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask me. Yes, miss. Wrong-footed. It took Letitia a few moments before she regained her senses. By the time she'd started to move, Miss Reed was already several paces away from her. I know she's quite a no-nonsense, harsh woman, but I do appreciate a woman who is upfront about these things and isn't hiding away her feelings. Miss Reed has some degree of appreciation from me. Well, what are you doing? Get a move on, girl. Yes, of course. Letitia hurried after the housekeeper, lifting her skirts as she did so. Her footsteps might have been cushioned by the wine-coloured carpet, but she could still hear the stark beating of her heart, which seemed uncomfortably loud. Goodness, do you also move so slowly in the city? It's a wonder anything gets done on time. Now come along. I shan't stop for you again should you flag behind. Miss Rye set off down a long hallway. Letitia followed, her foot clumsy, and did her best not to stumble. Letitia tried her best as she walked, not to stare at the expensive paintings which lined the walls, resplendent in their gilt frames, or the ceramic vases which sat atop plinths. She was afraid. Should she stop to examine her surroundings, she would never be able to start moving again. Then Miss Reed would walk on ahead, and she would be quite lost. Miss Reed's head bobbed before Letitia, as did the bun which adorned it. Her bun was pure white, like snow, which led Letitia to believe that Miss Reed must have been older than her brisk clip implied. She must have been in her 50s at the very least, Letitia mused. But she could have been older still than that. Miss Reed's face was so stony it was difficult to place her precise age, her eyes keen and alert despite the lines beneath them. Miss Reed's agility, in any case, was impressive. But Letitia supposed one had to move quickly while working in a place like Hatton. Seemed a necessity given how huge the house evidently was. Letitia could not help but marvel at the sheer size of the Langleys' abode. Big, which bore only 3 letters, did not seem enough to fully encapsulate it. The house was truly immense. Letitia had never seen anything like it before. Houses could not be too big in London. The city was bustling, already overpopulated, and the little space left had to be used effectively. Houses grew upwards rather than outwards. Slender terraced houses all packed together like the keys on a piano, Even the members of the upper echelons, such as the Mortimers, had lived in small, trim, tidy townhouses. They were easy to maintain, and they needed only a handful of servants. These terraced houses weren't particularly opulent, but they were comfortable, kept warm in the winter months by the fires that burned in their subterranean kitchens. Hatton Manor, meanwhile, wore its splendour on its sleeve. It, unlike the homes in London, had no neighbours to be conscientious of. It was surrounded by nothing save empty, unused land, which practically invited expansion. Tucked away in the countryside, it had been left to its own devices, growing larger and vaster and more unmanageable as it swallowed up the fens that fringed it. Hatton Manor was socially impressive for its enormity, but there was something inhospitable about it. The Mortimers had needed only a few servants to keep their household spick and span. The Langleys, by contrast, must have needed several dozen. Letitia had grown used to the foibles of the Mortimers' 3 scullery maids: the serious Abigail, the girlish Sarah, and the giggly Marjorie. Because there had only been 3 of them, she had grown to know them. How could she ever hope to know a serving staff of 30? It seemed an impossibility, nothing short of a statistical nightmare. Letitia felt worn and weary after her long journey, and it was all she could do to keep pace with Miss Rye. The housekeeper paused for only the briefest of seconds before each closed room, giving a swift description of the room beyond before she moved off again, as though anxious Letitia would grow complacent should she be granted even a moment's rest. The door to the left is a dining room. You shan't be eating here naturally. This room is reserved for the Langleys and their guests. Your meals will be taken in your room. This is the kitchen. It's the cook's domain. You will rarely have cause to come down here, if at all. This is the servants' hall. This is where the scullery maids take their meals and where they relax in the evenings. You are welcome to join them if you would like, though I imagine you would prefer to remain in your private quarters on the 2nd floor. Time moved sluggishly during their tour, as it always did when Letitia was fatigued. Miss Ree had barely shown her half the rooms on the ground floor, but Letitia was too tired to properly register it. Her boots pinched her feet, and her head ached. Hatton Manor boasted an inexhaustible, seemingly never-ending litany of rooms, and Letitia feared she would not be welcome in any of them. That she would not be permitted with her to dine with their employees had been obvious, but Letitia had a distinct feeling that she would not be welcome among the servants either. Did Miss Ree expect her to spend all her time inside her own room, like some sort of hermit? That would certainly make things easier for Letitia, though if that were the case, it seemed unnecessary to show her around all of the rooms, of which she had no cause to visit. Perhaps, Letitia thought glumly, this arduous trek, which would have tired even a foot soldier, was meant as some manner of punishment. Does Miss Ree mean to chastise Letitia for ungainly, awkward conduct upon their first meeting? If so, Letitia would have preferred a more direct method of scolding. At least then she would have been spared this extended tour of rooms she could not go in, and places she was not wanted. Miss Ree peppered her tour with details about Letitia's job. She told Letitia when she was expected to wake, at 7 o'clock, and where she would eat her breakfast, in her private quarters, and what to do with her dirty plates. Leave them outside her room for a scullery maid to collect. She told Letitia, too, that she was expected to commence her lessons with Genevieve in the schoolroom at 8 o'clock sharp. Lessons were to last until 4 o'clock in the evening, with a half-hour break at 10, and another longer break at 2. She was to teach Genevieve 2 hours of piano every day, with an hour for drawing and another hour for embroidery. It was imperative, Miss Reed said, that Genevieve have some proper manners beaten into her, and classes about her general deportment were a strict necessity. History and geography lessons were also mandatory. Reading, writing, and arithmetic were less of a concern, but important nonetheless. This information washed over Letitia in a deluge. She was by this point so tired, her head so heavy, she had scarce the energy to nod. Miss Ree had given Letitia permission to ask questions, should the finer details of her position elude her, but Letitia had so many questions she was unsure where to begin. Neither did she wish to, owing to a well-placed fear that Miss Ree would not appreciate her confusion. "How could you ask me something so simple? I thought you were supposed to be a capable governess," Miss Ree would surely say. Her hawk-like eyes narrowed with disdain. "Perhaps I overestimated you. Standard in the city must be far, far laxer than I'm used to. You're no more fit to be a governess than our scullery maids." And speaking of Hatton's scullery maids... "Fletcher, what in the world are you doing skulking about at this hour?" Fletcher, as it transpired, was a pretty maid with white skin, so pale it was almost translucent. Her hair, by contrast, was black and inky, gathered up in a bun and pinned to the back of her head. She was kneeling in the hallway which connected the entrance hall to the library and the drawing room. She held a dishcloth in one hand, a bucket of sudsy water sitting at her feet, and she'd been busy scrubbing the floorboards when Miss Ree arrived. "Ah, begging thy pardon, ma'am." Fletcher deposited the dishcloth in the bucket and rose to her feet. Her gait was clumsy, her posture off-kilter. Perhaps her legs had gone numb after kneeling on the hard wood for so long. "I was just cleaning the floorboards, mum, like thou asked." "Ah, yes, I recalled that I did ask you to do that. At 10 o'clock this morning." Miss Ree's voice was harsh like the crack of a whip, and Fletcher took a step back. Her white skin turned pink and a few loose strands of hair slipped from her bun. Though she looked worse for wear, Letitia had to admit she was beautiful. Fletcher's eyes were grey like a cloudy winter sky, and they were framed with luxurious eyelashes. Her lips were small and red, rosebud-like, her nose snub. Her limbs were long and slender, though she seemed a little thicker about the belly. Her apron strained somewhat around her stomach. Her severe black and white garb stretched taut. This detail, so incongruous. Oh, why was that so difficult? With Fletcher's twig-like arms and legs jarred with Letitia, and it seemed to jar with Miss Ree too. The housekeeper took in Fletcher's slipshod appearance, her nostrils dilating like those of an angry dragon's. "You should have been finished with the floors at least an hour hence. What kept you? And where is Pruitt? I thought she was supposed to be helping you." "She left, miss. Miss Langley called her away on an errand. She said it was urgent." "An errand? What kind?" "I don't know, ma'am. She didn't tell me. Miss Langley doesn't tell me nothing." "So you've spent the day cleaning the floor on your own?" "Yes, ma'am. For the last 3 hours or so, I reckon." "I see." Miss Ree's lips compressed together further and further still, until they seemed in real danger of disappearing. That, Letitia noted, was one of the housekeeper's idiosyncrasies. Whenever she was in a bad temper, which from what Letitia had gathered was a common occurrence, her facial features seemed to shrink, receding like the shore. When Letitia was small, her mother had always told her when she pulled faces that the wind would change and she would be stuck like that forever. She wondered if Miss Ree's mother had ever thought to share this piece of knowledge with her little girl. Given Miss Ree's general comportment, it seemed unlikely. "Very well, Fletcher. I shall forgive you just this once." "Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you kindly, ma'am." Fletcher dropped a neat curtsy. Now, Miss Ree looked around the hall, her features still a touch too small for the face which framed them. You can leave the cleaning. I'll get one of the other girls to do it. For now, can you take Miss Reed's luggage to her private quarters? Does that mean the room on the second floor, next to the schoolroom? Yes, indeed. Very well, Mum. Fletcher dropped Miss Ree another curtsy, then turned to look at Letitia. She surveyed her, her grey eyes curious, but far less scathing than her employer's. I take it that Miss Langley's governess? That's right, I'm Reed, Letitia Reed. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss... Oh, I'm no miss. Airs and graces don't really suit me, though thou'rt awful kind to suggest it. I'm Abigail Fletcher. The pleasure's all mine. Abigail? Yes, Mum? Does thou have a problem with that? Oh, no. Letitia shook her head. I was just thinking, it's quite the coincidence. There was a scullery maid at my last place of employment called Abigail, too. The Mortimer's Abigail hadn't been very much like this Abigail, though. While their Abigail had been a dull, slow-witted thing, with all the humour of a wooden plank, this Abigail seemed cast in the same mould as Marjorie, sweet and girlish, and easy to induce into peals of laughter. Already, Letitia thought, she liked her. Perhaps she could be some sort of ally against the austere Miss Ree. Miss Ree soon put a stop to these idle thoughts, however. She glanced between the scullery maid and the governess, her eyes narrowed, and said, in snappish tones, That's quite enough of that. We must get on. Go and attend to your duties, Fletcher, and you, Miss Reed, must come and follow me. Yes, ma'am? Certainly, ma'am. I beg thee pardon. Chat, I am just going to go refill my water bottle because I forgot to do that. Before starting stream, I've got an empty water bottle and I really fucking need it. So we'll just sit on the BRB screen until I get back, okay? See you in a bit. my dears, I'm back. I did get a bit cheeky and got myself some chocolate too. And the cat was so jealous. Cat was so jealous. I had to give her a smidgen of it. You know how it is with the babies. You have to get them a little smidgen of it. Just a little bit. It was tiny, I promise. But I'm back and I'm feeling refreshed. Let's get back into it, girls. Let's get back into it, little roses. I need to figure out what sort of way to describe you guys. I'll figure it out. It's awkward when I don't know what to call you guys. But yes, let's get back into it. Abigail bowed her head, the picture of contrition, and hurried off down the hallway. More of her dark locks had come unpinned from her bun, and a few loose strands snaked down the back of her dark dress. Letitia watched her depart, a hollow feeling in the pit of her stomach. Though she knew it was foolish, she felt as though she'd just lost a friend. Abigail, with her grey eyes and her easy smile, had been the most reassuring person she'd met all day. Now she was gone. Good riddance. Miss Reese sniffed and turned to glare at Letitia. Don't be too friendly with the scullery maids. They're beneath you. As a governess, you need only concern yourself with Miss Genevieve's needs. All else is unnecessary. Letitia thought that seemed a horribly dull way to live. Yet she did not say that. She knew that would only cause further complications. When faced with Miss Ree's stern, serious face, she could respond with naught, save a meek, "Yes, miss." Good. You'll do well to remember that. It'll save you a great deal of trouble. And Miss Reed? Yes, miss? Please remember that you're in Hatton now. You might have known an Abigail back in London, but she no longer matters. Erase her from your mind. I cannot abide sentimentality. Miss Reed spoke sternly, as though forgetting the past were as simple as discarding an unflattering, ill-fitting dress. And perhaps to her it was. Miss Reed was, as her unmarried title suggested, a loveless spinster of an old woman. She had never known feelings like Letitia had. Not for Abigail. Letitia had never been fond of her. But for Clara. Even now, with half the country between her and her old pupil, Clara remained at the forefront of Letitia's anxious mind. Letitia missed Clara intensely. But Miss Reed had been right on one matter at least. She was in Hatton now. London was far behind her. No good would come from clinging to the past. Why bother when she had accepted this post at Hatton so she could escape from it? God, Letitia, you're such a fucking mess. It wouldn't do to be pulled into the abyss of memory. Not on her first day at a new post. Letitia feared, if she let her own regrets catch her, that they would take hold, stronger than murky marshes, and never let go. The tour of the house concluded. Miss Reed then took Letitia to meet the master of the home, who was reposing in his study. Said study was a long oak-panelled room, located near the back of the manor. The windows faced the marshes, and they commanded quite the spectacular view. though said view was impeded somewhat by how very grim and overcast the sky was. Fronds of ivy curled about the windows, which cast a greenish tint on the light as it entered the room. This offered the room an odd, subaqueous sort of feeling, as though viewed subaqueous, more like probably, as though viewed through a film of water. The floor was made of wooden boards, which had been polished to perfection. The furniture was all wooden too, the numerous bookshelves, the desk, and the imposing chair set before it. If one had not known Arthur Langley was a prominent scholar of medieval history, that much would have been immediately apparent by entering his inner sanctum. Books were stacked upon his desk, though not untidily, and yet more leather-bound books were arranged on the shelves. The books looked very stern and serious, and Letitia could pick out similarly stern and serious titles emblazoned upon their spines. Summa Theologica and Dyspharia Mundi among them. What these titles meant, Letitia could not even begin to fathom. Her knowledge of Latin was limited. It was all Greek to her. Not every nook and cranny in Arthur's study was crammed full of books, though they did admittedly eat up the lion's share of the available space. There was a glass jar stood to one corner on a wooden table, containing 2 taxidermy magpies. These birds were perched upon a branch, suspended in perpetual stasis, their eyes bright and beady. The birds weren't alone either. There was yet another glass display case by the door, this one containing a taxidermy blue tit. Evidently Arthur was fond of birds, dead birds to be more precise. A portrait hung on the wall above the mantelpiece, which showed a young woman wearing a white dress. The portrait itself was slapdash, but the woman's beauty seemed to transcend the amateurish strokes that had painted her. The woman had long hair and large, almost liquid eyes. A book rested upon her lap, and her head was tilted, as though sharing a secret with whoever had painted her. It was an intimate piece. Letitia wondered who the subject was. Could it have been Arthur's wife? Letitia's interest was piqued, but you could hardly ask her employer about the mysterious woman's identity. Governesses were regarded more highly than maids, it was true, but Letitia was still Arthur's subordinate. Being too direct would have been incredibly rude. Letitia swallowed. She shifted from foot to foot, feeling for all the world like a naughty little girl. Was her skirt not too badly creased after her journey? Did her shoes still shine? What about her hair? Had it come loose from her chignon? Letitia tried and succeeded to suppress the urge to fiddle with her ensemble. She didn't want to make a poor impression. This was the first time she was to meet the master of the house. She had to show him just how competent she was. Letitia feared he would be hard to impress after witnessing all the very complicated books in Latin on his shelves. She had to at least try. Hatton Manor was a fresh start. She had to make the most of it. "Ah, Miss Reed, is it?" Arthur Langley, the patriarch of Hatton Manor, surveyed his new employee with a steady eye. He remained seated at his desk while Letitia stood, his fingers steeped together as a headmaster might upon regarding a rowdy student. Shyly, Letitia surveyed him and responded after a pause, which lasted just a fraction of a second too long. Yes, that's right." Letitia's voice wavered, and she felt an unsightly blush rise to her cheeks. Why was she acting so silly? She had been at Hatton for less than a full day and had yet to commence her lessons. It was too soon, surely, for her to be judged unworthy. It seemed unlikely, therefore, that Arthur would find any cause to dismiss her. Why, she had yet to unpack her belongings.
Letitia swallowed. She raised her head, her eyes meeting Arthur's. They were cool and blue and appeared intense, despite being lined with age. Everything about Arthur was sharp, from his angular shoulders to his aquiline nose. Though he was getting on in years, Letitia thought he might have been in his mid-40s or thereabouts. He was an undeniably handsome man. His fair hair was pomaded and neatly parted, and he wore a crisp suit with a starched collar. There was something commanding about him. His cool, icy gaze made Letitia's blood turn to ice. And? Arthur frowned. His gaze had become even sharper now, like a surgeon's trusty scalpel. Letitia shifted from foot to foot. She couldn't help herself. Arthur's handsome, perfectly symmetrical face had thrown her off kilter, as had his piercing gaze. Is there anything more you wish to know, sir? Well, a full name would be nice for a start. It's hardly an introduction otherwise, do you not agree? Oh, yes. Letitia blushed. Her blush was so strong she could feel it spreading across her face, and all the way to the tips of her ears. I apologize, sir, I wasn't thinking. My name is Reed, Letitia Reed. It's, a pleasure to meet you. Is it now? Arthur chuckled. His mirth was short-lived, but sounded musical. Forgive me for my impertinence, but you don't sound so sure. I am sure, very sure, in fact. I am honoured that you've appointed me to this post. I will do all I can to meet your expectations. Now that's more like it. I like a girl with a bit of gumption. For a moment I was starting to worry. Arthur was smiling, but Letitia felt her heartbeat quicken all the same. She could not afford to let her employee doubt her, particularly not during their first meeting. I do wonder, though. You look awfully young. How old are you? I shall be 25 come the following March, sir. So you are only 24? That is young, awfully so. I wonder if you'll be a match for my Jenny. She's quick as a whip, I dare say. She can run rings around me. Though Arthur's words were concerned, he spoke with the smile of a doting parent. It was evident that he loved his daughter, and he wanted the best for her. His fatherly love stirred something in Letitia's breast. Now she felt more determined than ever to meet her employer's expectations. You don't need to worry, sir. I might be young, but I'm experienced. I was a governess for 4 years prior in London, was it? Yes, I read your application. Your letter of recommendation was glowing, too. Oh, thank you, sir. There's no need to thank me. You should thank Lady Mortimer. The Mortimers were very good to me, sir. And yet, despite that, you still wished to seek employment elsewhere. Yes, sir. Letitia swallowed. Her palms, which hung at her sides, felt sticky. It was time to repeat the same lie she had told 2 months prior, when she had first handed in her notice to Lady Mortimer. It is because of my mother, sir. She has fallen ill. I wish to find a job closer to home so that I might help her should she need me. How admirable! How admirable! Few would trade a position in London to move somewhere so isolated. Where does your mother live, by the by? Harrogate, sir. That's okay, Dodo. You rest well. You get enough sleep. Look after yourself, okay? Harrogate? How curious. Silence descended. Arthur observed Letitia behind his steeped fingers, his eyes narrowed. Arthur's was a gaze that could strip back the skin from a person's body, revealing the layers of muscle and bone and the fine, delicate blood vessels beneath. Letitia shifted, afraid and being caught out. Lady Mortimer had accepted her lie without question, but Lady Mortimer had been a kind, trusting sort of a woman. Letitia was beginning to fear Arthur would be far harder to hoodwink. But of course he would be. That should have gone without saying. He could read Latin. It's curious, sir? Letitia prompted when the silence became more than she could bear. Oh, it's nothing. I was just thinking. I've spent all my life in North Yorkshire. I've made numerous trips to Harrogate, and I know what the locals sound like. Your enunciation is rather different from what I would have expected. Yes, well, I did spend 4 years in London. 4 years, Is that enough time to forget one's local vernacular? Letitia felt her heart hammer inside her chest. She wondered if it was loud enough that Arthur could hear her, sitting behind his imposing desk, though he was. Had he seen through her already? Perhaps he knew, too, Letitia's real reason for abandoning her old post. Could he see into her head, to the tangle of feelings she had for Clara? Thought was enough to make Letitia feel ill. To her relief, however, Arthur soon dropped the subject. Seemed he had lost interest in her because the intensity in his gaze waned and he glanced back to his books. Very well. The ever-capable Miss Reed seems to believe that you are suitable for the job, and that is more than enough to satisfy me. I feel it is incumbent on me, alas, to offer you a few words of warning, though. Yes, sir? You will be permitted time off during the weekends. Naturally, you will be expected to go to church on Sunday with the rest of the servants. I shan't stop you if you wish to take time off during the weekday to visit your ailing mother, but you shall not be paid should you do so. If you are absent from your post for too long without sufficient cause, you will be fired. Do not try to take advantage of my kindness. Oh, I shan't, sir. I'll do my duty. I won't let you down. I swear it on my mother's life. Now that seems quite bold, given your poor mother's afflicted state. I hope you have no future cause to regret this remark. Oh! Letitia gasped, alarmed at her own carelessness. But to her relief, Arthur was still smiling. For a man whose office was so neat and tidy. Eh? Breakfast at Commodus? From Danganronpa? Danganronpa mentioned in chat? For a man whose office was so neat and tidy, exactingly so, he was surprisingly droll. His blue eyes were piercing, but his tone was genial. It was hard not to like Arthur, not in the least because of his good looks. I hope for both our sakes you're enough to make my Jenny toe the line. I very much hope so too. That makes 2 of us then. Good luck, Miss Reed. Godspeed, and please keep Jenny out of my sight. Her presence can be quite distracting, and I do not wish for any diversions while I tend to my studies. As you can see, I have a great many tomes to peruse, and reading is an occupation best indulged in alone. Oh, I see. Letitia blinked. This seemed like quite an odd command, coming from a man who had seconds prior seemed so doting. Letitia had pegged Arthur Langley as an affectionate father. Perhaps she had been mistaken. Could a doting parent have issued such an order in tones so very certain? Letitia could not countenance it. She had yet to meet Genevieve, but she felt a pang of sympathy well up in her chest. What must it have been like to live in an empty house out in the moors with no mother and a father who did not care to spend time with her? If Genevieve did act out, it must have been from loneliness. Letitia couldn't blame her. She had been in Hatton Manor for only a couple of hours, and already she felt homesick. Letitia had expected to meet her pupil, the elusive Miss Genevieve, after her talk with Arthur Langley, but it was not to be. Miss Reed was waiting for her in the hallway, and it was with her lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure she addressed Letitia thus. "You look exhausted, practically haggard in fact. You are in no fit state to see the young miss now. It is impossible to make right a bad first impression, and if she were to see you now, she would never respect you. For now, you may retire to your bedroom. Fletcher should have brought your bag up. You can spend the evening unpacking. I'll ask one of the servant girls to send you something light to eat at about 8 or so. Does that sound agreeable?" "Oh yes, miss, that sounds very agreeable indeed." Truth be told, Letitia had never heard a better proposal in her life. Not even Miss Reed's cold eyes or her wrinkled brow could detract from it. Letitia's bones, once cold and weary, flooded with warm relief. Now that she had Miss Reed's permission to relax, she almost sank to the floor. Her feet were still hurting and her whole body ached. "Very well." Miss Reed gave Letitia a curt nod. "I trust you remember where your room is?" "Yes, miss. It's on the second floor down the left-hand corridor, the second to last room on the right. I remember." "Good. You may sleep whenever you like. But be mindful that your official duties will commence tomorrow. You must be awake at 7 o'clock on the dot, and in the schoolroom at 8. You can meet Miss Langley then. Make sure you look presentable. Your appearance is of paramount importance." "Yes, miss. I will do my best." "I wish I could say that is good enough, but I must warn you now not to get complacent. Your old mistress might have adored you, but you do not answer to her now. I am your superior, and you must impress me. I run a tight ship. If you flag behind, I won't hesitate to throw you out on your ear. Now you had best get to bed. By the looks of you, you need it. I won't have you yawning during Miss Langley's lessons." Letitia took this as her cue to leave. She thanked Miss Reed for her time while inwardly reviling her, curtsied, then turned to navigate the hallways. It took Letitia several minutes to find her lodgings, located on the second floor, but eventually she made it. Eventually some of Miss Reed's extensive tour must have sunk in. It was with a sigh that Letitia let herself into her private quarters, which were unlocked, then looked around. Her new room in Hatton was larger than her old back in London. The bed was wider too, the furniture finer. The floor was made of wood, much like the rest of Hatton, and it was partially obscured by a tasselled rug. The wallpaper was cornflower blue, the skirting board painted white. The bed frame was made of iron, and the bed itself was made up neatly with white sheets. A table sat beside the bed, upon which was a gas lamp. There was a chest of drawers in the corner, where Letitia could stow away her clothes, and a ceramic bowl and pitcher where Letitia could wash her face and hands, and a towel with which she could dry them. A circular mirror hung above the dresser, suspended, and paintings dotted the walls, one depicting the rolling countryside, another a sheer cliff with the ocean churning below. Kamada serves banana jelly and on toast for breakfast. That does sound like Mr. Kamada. That does sound like him. Looking at that picture made Letitia feel faintly unwell. She had never liked heights, and she turned her head away. Her window was closed, but Letitia could see fronds of ivy pressed against the window panes, their broad leaves brushing against the glass. Beyond those trailing plants, Letitia could see the grounds of Hatton Manor, and beyond that, the untamed moors themselves. She had ridden through the moors with Gerard Lockett on their way to Hatton. That had only been a scant handful of hours ago, but now it felt like a lifetime away. Oh, we get another pretty piece of art, chat. Look at her. The somber beauty of it. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, that's just so charming. Letitia crossed her room to her window. She let her fingers fall against the glass and leant forward, her forehead bumping against its smooth, cool surface. Then she exhaled. She was surrounded by greenery no matter where she looked. For miles around there were only hills and trees and marshes. No people at all. She couldn't see the roofs of Beeston from beyond the moors. It was too far away. There were no people outside, not even Gerard in his carriage or the Langleys' gardeners. It was deathly still and quiet, the landscape stirred only by the breeze. The countryside was very, very still compared to the city, almost sterile. Though the hills seemed to burst with life, they looked grey and cold and uninspiring to Letitia's tired eyes. When she had looked out the window at the Mortimers' house, she had seen the fine streets of London, all fringed with trees. There were always carriages passing at odd hours and children playing hopscotch and with hoops. There had been so much noise. Now, however, there was nothing. Maybe if she'd been a hermit, like Beeston's famous St. Osbert, she would have enjoyed her lodgings. Cleanliness might have been close to godliness, but so was silence. Why else were the congregation bidden to be quiet during church? Alas, Letitia's relationship with God had been rather uneasy as of late. All of a sudden, she wasn't sure she wanted to be close to him. She did not want him to know the thoughts which circulated through her head, dense and thick like the muddy mire waters. Just as Letitia stood at her window looking out over the marshes, she imagined him looking back at her. Thought made her blood run cold, and she took a step back, grateful for the fronds of ivy which hung about her windows. Perhaps they would block his all-seeing, all-knowing eyes. She was alone, but she felt like she was being watched, more so than she ever had done in London. Maybe it was the guilt. She was being silly, scaring herself with idle thoughts and jumping at nothing. It must have been because of the quiet. It was so very quiet in her room in the moors. There was nothing to do other than think. Titi was exhausted, however, and did not wish to think any longer. Letitia busied herself for the following hour by unpacking her travel bag, which Abigail had brought to her room. Once all her clothes were in order, she was hit with a wave of fatigue. Letitia had done her best to push through her exhaustion, but now she was alone. She couldn't stop herself from succumbing. Chat, I might have to stop at the hour-and-a-half mark. I'm a bit eepy. I'm a bit worn out feeling, and I've got stuff I need to get done, unfortunately. But we'll just keep going for now. She approached her bedroom window and drew the curtains. Then she stripped out of her blouse and skirt, rendered dusty after the long journey, and changed into her night attire. Come 7 o'clock, she was lying in her new bed, and at 1/2 the hour she was fast asleep. Letitia never did find out that following morning if one of the servant girls had stopped by at 8 o'clock with a tray of food. If they had knocked, she had slept right through it. When she awoke the following morning, there was no tray outside her door. It must have been cleared away. Sighing, she sat up in her bed and glanced at the clock upon her bedside table. She was up well before the appointed hour, before sunrise, in fact. Letitia's head was thick with thoughts, all vague and hazy and disoriented. They swirled inside her skull like minestrone soup. What was she doing here? Why had she ventured all the way out here? Was she mad? Thank you for the hydrate, Slacko. It's nice to see you. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's forced break time. Slacko got me. Be right back in a minute, chat. And I'm back! Wow, I'm back! Wow. It's not a new BRB screen, I just kept forgetting to fucking use it. I'm gonna be real, I kept forgetting to use it. Teehee. I could send you the artist for it later, actually. That might be fine. I own up to my scuffle all the time, babes. I have a lot of it. It would be silly if I didn't. Perhaps well, she was. She must have been. Or she never would have dreamed about kissing Clara. Oh my god, Letitia. She's a disaster, guys. She's a fucking mess. We need to get this girl into a gay bar. In her sleepy befuddlement, the room around Letitia shifted. She saw it overlaid with her old bedroom, the dresser and the wash basin and the window, doubling, tripling, quadrupling. Her head hurt. So dazed was Letitia, she was convinced that her new lodgings, which existed within a dream. She needed only to slide back into bed, pulling the covers beneath her chin, and then she would waken once more in the Mortimer's pleasant terraced home back again in London. Abigail would bring her some of the cook's porridge and a glass of barley tea, and then she would wash and dress and go to the schoolroom where Clara would be waiting for her. Clara would smile at her auburn hair curling over her shoulders, and she would tell Letitia that she'd been waiting for her, had missed her in fact. Oh, if only. Half asleep, Letitia lay back in bed and let her eyes fall shut. She had no desire to awake and face the day, nor did she care to meet Miss Genevieve. "Girlie! It's your first day on the job. Get up! Get the fuck out of bed! Come on!" She wanted only to rest. Too fucking bad. You have work. In repose, at least, she didn't need to think about how new and strange her circumstances were, or how her life had changed. In her dreams, she promenaded through Hyde Park with Clara. They were arm in arm, and they were both laughing. Fucking hell. When Letitia woke a second time, it was to a rapping of knuckles against her bedroom door. "Girl!" "Excuse me, miss?" A voice came from the other side of the door, light and high and distinctly feminine. The speaker, whoever they were, spoke in a smooth cadence with none of the muddy vowels and colloquial phrases, as Abigail had. Letitia could tell, despite the dull pounding of her head. The person who stood on the opposite side of the door was a stranger to her. That was a pity. She had hoped she might speak again to Abigail, and in doing so make at least one ally. She had not, however, Letitia reminded herself, come to Hatton to socialize. That could not have been further from the case. She had banished herself to the countryside so that she might escape. She had forfeited the right to friends. Her old relationships lay in tatters, and as for her feelings towards Clara... Girl. Well, the less said about that, the better. "Miss?" The unfamiliar voice from the other side of the door spoke anew. "Are you awake? It is 7 o'clock already. You need to be in the schoolroom for 8. It wouldn't do to be late on your first day." "No, it wouldn't. It really fucking wouldn't, chat." "Oh, yes. I apologize." Letitia shook her head. Some of the sleep had slipped off her shoulders, and now she felt slightly more awake. "I am still in my nightclothes, but you may come in. I presume you've come to serve me my breakfast." "Yes, indeed. My hands are rather laden with the tray at present, though. If you could open the door, I'd be most obliged." "Right, yes, of course." Still a little disoriented, Letitia rose to her feet. Though clad in her nightgown, she felt uncomfortably exposed. Letitia knew she oughtn't have fallen asleep again earlier. In a more perfect world, she would have been dressed already to meet the morning, in one of her plain blouses and skirts. As it was, Letitia felt wretched. She had slept a good deal, but her sleep had been disorderly, filled to the brim with dreams. When she awoke, she felt no less better rested than she had the night before. Still, she wished to sleep, but through sheer force of will she persevered. Letitia took the brass doorknob between her fingers. It was cool, and seemed to sap what little heat remained in her hands. She turned the knob, then let the door swing open on its hinges to reveal its visitor. "Begging your pardon, miss. Thank you very much." The maid offered Letitia a neat curtsy, then let herself into Letitia's bedroom. The first thing which struck Letitia about the young maid, as she let her eyes fall across the young woman, was how very pretty she was. The maid, still nameless for the present, was more attractive than her status as a scullery maid should have been allowed. She looked less like a serving girl and more like a princess from a silly children's story, though she could not, of course, compare to Clara. Where Clara had been brunette, this maid was blonde. Where Clara childishly energetic, woman, demure. Clara had been only 16 years of age, but this maid was clearly older than that. She wore the same manner of maid's dress as that which Abigail had donned, but the dress did not look plain upon her. The black gown accentuated how pale her skin was, and the apron which cinched about her waist served to highlight the impossible slenderness of her figure. She was so pretty, Letitia felt herself freeze. It had been easy to talk to this woman when she had been a disembodied voice behind the door. Now they were face to face, she knew not what to say. "Oh, you fucking useless lesbian." "Here is your breakfast, miss. The cook asked me to send it up. There's a slice of fresh bread and a pat of butter and marmalade. There's a soft-boiled egg too and some smoked fish. Kippers, I believe. To drink, there is tea. I trust this is to your liking?" "Oh yes, this looks excellent. Thank you, Miss Pruitt. Dinah Pruitt." "Pruitt, then. It is greatly appreciated." "Oh, don't praise me. I'm not the one who made it. All compliments should go to the cook. I'll relay your kind words to her when next I see her, though. I trust she'll be pleased." The maid, Dinah her name was, smiled prettily. Letitia had already thought Dinah a great beauty. When she smiled, she looked beautiful still. She looked more beautiful still. Her grey eyes seemed to light up, and her sweet mouth curved like the crescent moon. "I wish you could take the time to enjoy your breakfast, but alas, you must hurry. Miss Rhea is very particular about timekeeping." "Yes, I gathered as much. Did she give you an earful yesterday?" Dinah's expression softened. "I almost feel like I ought to apologize. She can be quite rigid, I suppose one might say. Still, I can scarcely blame her when she has to contend with Miss Langley." "You are speaking of Genevieve?" "Yes, indeed. The young mistress is awfully wilful. Have you met her yet?" "No, not yet. I will see her momentarily in the schoolroom." "Ah, I see. Good luck in that case. You might need it." Letitia paused as she ate her breakfast, seated upon the edge of her bed, her fingers stilled, the silvery spoon held between her fingers. The smell of her soft-boiled egg seemed to grow stronger as the moments passed. There was something sulphurous about it, which turned Letitia's stomach. The egg itself, which peeked out through the cracked shell, seemed a touch overdone. The egg whites were hard and rubbery, while the yolk itself had solidified into a bright garish splash of yellow. Letitia was hungry, yes, but Dinah's warning made her appetite wane. She had half a mind to push her tray away. There was something ominous about Dinah's words. It put Letitia in mind of the talk she had had with Arthur Langley yesterday afternoon. Keep Jenny out of my sight. What was wrong with Genevieve? Was there something Miss Rhea had not told her? The advert in the Morning Post had mentioned nothing of behavioural problems. Is Miss Langley really such a handful? She can be. Her moods are mercurial. Sometimes she's as sweet as an angel, but at others... Dinah's voice trailed off. A pink blush rose to her pale cheeks, and she shook her head. Oh, never mind. I shouldn't be in the business of gossiping. You'll see the young miss soon enough. Then you can make up your mind for yourself. Very well. I believe I shall do just that. Letitia tried to sound confident, but she could already feel her self-assurance failing her. Too late, she began to wish she had never applied for the position of Genevieve's governess. But Letitia knew, even if she had the opportunity to go back in time, she would have acted in the same way as she already had. When Letitia had responded to that advertisement, her own desperation had drowned out everything else. In her panicked state, she had been prepared to move to the bowels of hell itself, if she had to, in order to escape from Clara and her own emotions. Well, she had certainly done that. Now Clara was far away. Letitia was trapped in Hatton Manor, surrounded for miles by the untamed moors. An escape seemed nothing more than a fleeting dream. Once she had breakfasted and dressed, Letitia then hastened to the schoolroom without further delay. If she had feared losing herself in the sprawling hallways of Hatton Manor, she needn't, for the schoolroom was located only one door down from her own private quarters. Despite her late awakening, Letitia arrived at her destination 10 minutes earlier than Miss Ree had specified. The schoolroom was quite empty when she stepped into it, so quiet it was almost eerie. Miss Langley was nowhere in sight. There were a couple of wooden chairs, one for Letitia herself and one for Genevieve, she supposed, but Letitia felt too tense to sit down. Instead, she glanced about the room, her lips pursed. Hatton Manor was quite different to Letitia's previous place of employment, but the schoolroom looked just like any other. It was similar to the one where Clara had taken her lessons, down to the wooden floorboards. The schoolroom in Hatton Manor, however, was far larger. The rays of wan, wispy sunlight which filtered in through the windows could scarcely light the whole room up, and shadows pooled in every corner. The walls were lined with wooden bookcases filled with historical and geographical tomes, which seemed much too advanced for a young child. Letitia herself flipped through them. There was little else to do while waiting for Genevieve to put in her long-awaited appearance, and found that the small print only worsened her aching head. She soon slotted those books back upon the shelf where they belonged. There was a wooden globe in a corner, sitting atop a three-legged table, and a blackboard with a musical stave painted neatly at the top. There was a piano, too, which was larger and more expensive than the one Clara had played. It was pushed up in a far corner of the room, and it seemed to take up much too much space. There was something almost monstrous about it, even with its closed lid, and part of Letitia almost feared it. Her nerves were quite shot, and still she had yet to even greet the elusive Genevieve. The minutes ticked by, but the young miss did not arrive. 8 o'clock came and went, but the door did not open. The room was quite still. It was so quiet, Letitia could hear the beleaguered sound of her own breathing. She could hear, too, the irregular tapping of ivy against the glass windows, blowing back and forth in the breeze. In Letitia's anxious, awkward state, it sounded as though dozens of fingertips were rapping against the panes. As she waited in the schoolroom, which was far too large for one person, she could not help but think of ghosts and phantoms. The people of Yorkshire had all sorts of superstitions. Gerard had told Letitia a little of them during her bleak journey through the moors. The marshlands were supposed to be populated. Sin! Hi guys! Hi raiders! Welcome in! Welcome! It's lovely to see you all. How are you doing? I would give you a shout out, but I still haven't quite figured out how to do that. Hi Banshee! Hi Sin! Welcome! What were you playing? What were you playing? Did you have fun? Until Dawn. Are you playing the remake? I heard that came out recently. Oh, the remaster. I hope there's some fun new stuff in it. Yeah. The original was quite fun, but I hope the remaster has some new things for people to find. It's not perfect, obviously, but I think it's one of the better ones from that series of games the studio made. Oh, new scenes? Oh, that's good. You love to hear it. Oh, I should play it sometime. I've got so many games I need to finish on the channel already. But I should play it sometime. It sounds fun. I don't mind a game that's based on QuickTime events and bullshit like that. I know QuickTime event stuff gets a lot of hate, but I think if it's employed well, it can be quite fun. But yes, welcome in, Raiders. Welcome, welcome. We are playing Salomes Kiss. It is a gothic lesbian story full of tragedy and dramatic intentions. We have arrived. Oh yes, don't worry about Don't worry, son. You can go have a rest, get some water, some food, whatever you need to do. Do not worry. If you've just been streaming, you probably have some stuff you need to catch up on health-wise. Take care of yourself, hun. But yes, we've gotten back into Salomes Kiss. We had like a whole week break last week because I was sick. I'm technically still sick, but like I'm better than I was, and I don't want to like spend more than a week on break. It's annoying. It's annoying. I want to stream. But yeah, I also was prompted because I got a comment on the VODs channel on YouTube that they were wondering when I was going to continue the game. And I was like, oh, it's in demand? Well, okay. This will be my next one when I get back. We go into it, yeah. But yes, welcome in, welcome. We are playing as the governess Letitia. She is an anxious bottom bitch. She is such a bottom. She is a governess. And she is currently waiting at the Hatton Manor schoolhouse for her new student, who has not shown up on time. And it's a problem because she has managed to show up on time with a headache and with the urge to sleep in and just so many anxieties in her silly little brain. It's ridiculous. So we need to track down this Genevieve lady. But given how much our lovely Letitia rambles on in her head about whatever, it might take a minute. But yes, welcome in. If you want to catch up on what's happened so far, I do as I said, I do have the VODs on my YouTube channel, which is linked on my About section with all my socials and things. Don't you worry, it's not hard to find. And I hope you do enjoy my VODs if you end up jumping over there. But welcome in, welcome. It's lovely to see you all. Oh no, Dodo. I've been there. It's tough. It's nice to see you back, but also that's disappointing. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you can rest soon. It's tough sometimes. Sleep isn't always the kindest thing to get to. We'll jump back into it now, but thank you for the raid, everyone. I do appreciate it a ton. It's very sweet. The marshlands were supposed to be populated with any number of creatures, which typically hid beneath the primordial ooze. I love saying the word primordial. Oh! It's the start of the show! Miss Reed! Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. Sin, I feel like you'll like Genevieve. I feel like you'll really like her. She's not a great girl. She is horrible sometimes, but I feel like you'd like her a lot. You are Miss Reed, aren't you? Oh! Letitia whipped her head about, her eyes large as saucers. The door to the schoolroom had been thrown open with little warning, thus shattering the pervasive quietude. Letitia had been so ensconced in her thoughts. I mean, that happens all the time. This is a common Letitia problem. She gets so ripped in her brain. It's ridiculous. I'm surprised she can make it as a governess with that attitude. She had forgotten about Genevieve. In her panicked state, the opening of the door heralded not her young pupil, but a bevy of demons come to drag her to her doom. But of course, she was being foolish. Miss Reed? Genevieve peered at her governess curiously, arms linked behind her waist. Miss Reed, are you all right? Oh, yes, I am quite fine. My apologies. Letitia held one hand to her breast. She could feel her heart pounding rapidly beneath the fabric of her blouse. So very surprised was she, it felt her heart was in danger of shattering her ribs. I was merely startled, that is all. I did not expect to see you so suddenly, Miss Langley. Hmm? Genevieve tilted her head to one side, in an almost coquettish manner. Is this sudden? I should have been here 5 minutes ago. Weren't you waiting for me? Yes, I suppose I was. Her fright abated. Letitia let her arm fall slack to her side. Now she felt composed enough to examine her pupil. Genevieve stood in the threshold of the schoolroom. The young girl Letitia had heard so very much about. But she was not at all what Letitia had been expecting. She had thought Genevieve to be a foul-tempered young girl, still in single digits, 6 or 7 perhaps. The Genevieve who had intruded into the schoolroom, however, was quite different. She was very tall, taller even than Letitia. Her hair was the colour of copper, and it fell about her shoulders in a curly tangle. Her eyes were striking grey, lined with long eyelashes, and her full lips were apple red. She was attired in a gown which did not appear particularly suitable for schoolwork. It was green, which showed off her eyes, with a low neckline. Yes, I have noticed that, chat. The low neckline is a nice feature. Good job, Genevieve. We appreciate that very much. Rather a large amount of Genevieve's pale flesh was on display, and the sharp lines of her clavicle stood out beneath her skin. The hem of Genevieve's dress was short enough to display her ankles, and what ankles she had! They were so slender and delicate they could have belonged to a ballerina. Genevieve did not look at all at home in the jury schoolroom. She looked like a resident of Versailles, ready to dance the night away. She was astoundingly attractive, in a wild manner which unsettled Letitia. Letitia had come to Hatton Manor so she could escape from Clara in her own heady emotions. She had hoped to find comfort of a sort in the countryside, dull and monotonous though it may have been. During her long journey she had entertained herself with thoughts of old textbooks, piano lessons, and walks among the grounds of Hatton Manor. She would name for Genevieve the clouds in the sky, and point out the unique leaves upon the branches of the trees. She would teach her basic vowels and consonants, and teach her how to write her name, and tell her of the past kings of England. The reason she assumes this is because usually you hire the governess for the child when they're like 5 or 6, like when they need to start school. This is clearly an older woman. She should already have a governess. She should already be educated a great deal. This is confusing, and it was not in the advertisement. That had been Letitia's dream. This Genevieve, alas, was far too old for such simple lessons. She was no young child, as Letitia had anticipated. She seemed older even than Clara. Genevieve was, in every way, a fully grown woman. Now what was she to do? Excuse me, but... You are Genevieve, aren't you? Desperately, yet without any true conviction, Letitia clung to the hope that this arresting visit was not in fact Genevieve, but some sort of relative. She might have been an aunt or a cousin, or maybe even her mother. Those hopes were soon dashed, however, by a cheery exclamation issued forth from Genevieve's neat, pert mouth. Yes, that's right. I'm Genevieve. Who else would I be? I was not sure. A cousin, perhaps? Or maybe the mistress of the house. My cousins never come to Hatton to visit me. I can't say I blame them either. It's so drab here. And as for my mother, well, she's dead. Did you not know? Oh, yes. Letitia felt her face flush, suitably chastised as she recalled her earlier talk with Miss Ree. How could she have forgotten? Genevieve's presence must have flustered her far more than she had thought. My apologies, I was not thinking. That's all right, you haven't been here all that long. I can't expect you to know everything. Yes, but it would be nice if I knew some things. What was that? Oh, nothing. Letitia's face turned redder than before. Abashed, she glanced away out at the window and the ivy which tangled about it. I was merely surprised, that's all, to see how very old you are. I had imagined you were still a child. Alas, I'm no child. At least I wasn't the last time I checked. Genevieve laughed at this, as though it was the height of hilarity. Though Letitia was no longer looking at the girl, woman rather, she could still see her face reflected in the window, her pale face tinged green by the trailing fronds of ivy. Genevieve looked even prettier when she laughed, Letitia realized with a jolt. Roses bloomed in her cheeks and her eyes shone. She looked almost like... But no. Letitia could not afford to let herself walk down that particular path. If she did, her heart, which already felt as though it was being constricted by a steely vice, would be pulped beyond recognition. Miss Langley! Call me Genevieve, please. Or Jenny, if that's too much of a mouthful. Miss Langley is so staid and serious. Genevieve, then. Letitia would not, under any circumstances, refer to her pupil as Jenny. That was the familiar, intimate nickname her father had used. How old are you? 18. I'll be 19 soon. My birthday is in December. OMG, twinsies! Twinsies! Birthday month twins. Hee. Oh, I see. Letitia frowned. Are you really as old as all that? What do you mean as old as all that? Genevieve pouted. It was not the most mature of gestures, but there was a certain charm to her puffed-out cheeks. You're making me sound ancient, Miss Reed. I might be a bit older than you thought, but I'm still a fair young maiden in the first blush of my youth. Any man would be pleased to have me. Or any woman, Letitia silently appended, with certain tastes. This, however, was a dangerous thought to entertain. Letitia did not voice it. Instead, she sighed. She seemed to be doing that a lot as of late, and said, My apologies, I did not mean to be rude. I was just surprised. Genevieve smiled at this, her distemper gone in a matter of moments. It's all right, I've not taken any offence. Still, this is very peculiar. If Genevieve was 18, and Letitia saw no reason why she would lie about such a matter, that made her a fully grown adult. She was older than Clara and only 6 years Letitia's junior. It was most unexpected, and it seemed strange besides that Genevieve would even need a governess at her age. Some young ladies continued to learn music, art, and foreign languages with their governess until their early 20s, but most would be married off long before then. Perhaps Genevieve, living in the marshes, had no immediate marriage prospects lined up. She had said that her cousins refused to visit her in Hatton, but that being the case, it seemed unlikely any eligible bachelors would see fit to put in an appearance. I wonder why Miss Reed did not mention your age in that advert of hers. It would have been a useful piece of information to have. I don't know. I can't fathom how her mind works. Genevieve shrugged. Maybe she thought it would put people off. Most governesses prefer to look after cute, obedient little children, or so I've heard. Do you mean to suggest that you are not obedient? I can be if the mood takes me. You'd best not make me cross though, Miss Reed, or I can be quite frightful. I had heard, yes. You had? Already? Have the other servants been gossiping about me? Any other lady might have been irate at this prospect, But Genevieve seemed only amused. Her eyes lit up like that of a naughty girl's, and she said, "Let me guess. It was Dinah who told you that, wasn't it? I'll bet anything it was." "You're, are familiar with Pruitt?" "Pruitt?" Genevieve wrinkled her nose. "That's Dinah's last name, isn't it? I never call her that. It sounds so funny. It makes me think of prunes, and Dinah isn't at all pruny." "I suppose she isn't, no." If Letitia had to liken Dinah Pruitt to any sort of fruit, prunes would not have been at the top of her list. She was so sweet and fair, peaches seemed more apt. "And yes, to answer your previous question, I know Dinah. I know all the servants here. Rowena doesn't like me talking to them. Well, she doesn't like anything I do." Then again, Genevieve scuffed her shoe against the ground, a pout playing about her pretty face. "Dinah doesn't much like it when I talk to her either. She says she's too busy to be my friend, and anyway it wouldn't be proper. I don't think she really thinks that, though. She only says it because she's afraid of old Rowena. She acts like she wants nothing to do with me, but now I hear she's been chattering about me behind my back. What a horrid little hypocrite she is. I don't think she meant any ill by it." "Probably not, no. I think she was trying to warn you. I can be wicked when I want, but that's only because I get so very frightfully bored. There's nobody else to really talk to around here. This house is so big and desolate out in the middle of nowhere. Father's always locked away in his study, and Mother passed away last year. I don't have any brothers and sisters, so I'm all alone. It's been so dull. We can forgive her for all her crimes that she's going to commit, can't we, Chat? She's bored, you guys. She's just bored. We can forgive her for anything she does in the visual novel from now on. Every crime that she commits from this stage on, we can forgive." "I'm glad that you're here, Miss Reed. You should make for an amusing companion. Maybe I can stop chasing after Dinah now. She'll like that, I wager." "I imagine Miss Reed will like it too." "Oh no, if you think that you'll be sorely mistaken. That old witch is too loveless to like anything, least of all me. In fact, I think she despises me." "She does? But why?" "Well, let's just say when I was younger I might have caught an eel in the marshes and hidden it inside of one of her slippers. That's so funny, though. I mean, she caught an eel. That's hilarious. I mean, it's a bit naughty, obviously, but it's kind of funny, too." "My goodness!" Letitia stared at Genevieve, her eyes wide with scandalized alarm. "Tell me you didn't." "Yes, I did. It was one of my proudest accomplishments." You wouldn't think it to look at her, but Rowena's terrified of eels. It gave her such a start. Her screams could be heard through the whole house. Oh, it was glorious. Until she told Miss Porter about it, that is, and she gave me a good thrashing. Genevieve shuddered. Oh, I couldn't abide that awful woman. Miss Porter, I mean. She was my old nursemaid, but there was nothing nursing about her attitude. Nor was she particularly maidenly, for that matter. She was a large, hulking creature with an even shorter temper than Rowena. She used to beat me with a slipper when I misbehaved. She was awful. I take it she no longer works here? No, she does not, and good riddance. I'm much too old for a nurse now. But not, Letitia appended inside her head. Too old for a governess. Perhaps it was high time Letitia steered the conversation away from eels and thrashings, and back to more neutral ground. Genevieve had a way with words, it was true, and the thought of Miss Reed putting on her slippers to discover a slimy eel was an amusing one. But Letitia knew she could not dwell upon such diverting episodes. If she was to be Genevieve's governess, she would have to educate her, not indulge her. Listening to silly tales like this would never do. Your story is very droll, Genevieve. But what about your past education? What about it? I heard you have never before had a governess, but surely you must have been schooled in such manner. I presume you can read and write. Oh no, I've never had a governess before, but I'm not a complete simpleton. I know the basics. My mother taught me the alphabet and spellings and things. She was quite an accomplished woman. I see. And what about history, geography, foreign languages? My mother was Belgian, Miss Reed. She could speak French fluently, pretty as anything. She used to speak French to me too. I know a little, though it's quite rusty. And as for history and geography, I know that London is our capital, at least. Indeed. Letitia pursed her lips together. Genevieve was quick-witted and lively, but Letitia could see that she would have her work cut out for her. Genevieve might have known some basics, but her general knowledge seemed spotty at best. What about the fine arts, music and the like? I see you have a piano. Do you know how to play it? I know a few simple songs, but I'm very much a beginner. I've never had any real teachers, you see, other than my mother, but she was always sickly. She promised she would teach me, but... Genevieve's voice trailed away, swallowed by the too large schoolroom. She did not need to elaborate any further. Letitia already knew how that particular tale ended. Letitia could not help but feel a stab of sympathy for the young Miss Landley. She was not sure at all what she had expected it was true. But the recent death of her mother must have stung. She must have been very lonely living in such an isolated part of the world, with nobody for company, not even a governess. It was all well and good that she had been instructed by her mother, but based on what little Letitia gleaned, the departed Miss Langley hadn't always the time or the energy to sit with her daughter in the draughty schoolroom. When did your mother pass away? Do you mind me asking? It was, well... Genevieve swallowed. Feels like it was a long time ago, but in reality it was not so far away as all that. It happened in February of last year. She was pregnant. There were... complications. The roads were icy and Hatton is as isolated as it is. It took the physician hours to arrive, and by that point, well, it was too late. Letitia winced. The spike of sympathy that pierced through her heart became even keener. Now filed into such a sharp point, she was surprised it did not draw blood. How was she to reply to that? Letitia was not familiar with bereavement, and neither was she familiar with Genevieve. Everything she could think to say sounded stilted and unconvincing. In the end, she decided not to comment. She had always found it easier to run. Does that mean you've been alone then, without any sort of companionship for over a year? Genevieve nodded. You had no nurse nor any governess? Genevieve shook her head. And your father saw no issue with this? Why did he not try to find you a governess sooner? Oh, I don't know. Can't even begin to understand how his mind works. Genevieve rolled her eyes upwards until her irises were swallowed by a sea of white. My father's very serious, you must understand. He's a man of letters and academic. He's much too busy holding himself up in his office reading old Latin texts from the 16th century to pay any attention to little old me. Genevieve's tone was unmistakably bitter. The vitriol that dripped from her tongue was so shocking, Letitia took a step back. Genevieve had sounded downright gleeful when she spoke of tormenting Miss Ree, but the hatred she held for her father was unmistakable. She must have despised him. Knowing father, not that I do know him, he must have forgotten about me. We see one another so rarely, perhaps it slipped his mind that he even has a daughter. Do you not see him during meals, at the least? Rarely. He's always in his study, like I said, poring over his oh-so-important tomes. Or he's on his little business trip, buying yet more books. He never asks me if I want to come with him. I'm always left here languishing. Father wasn't even in Hatton when Mother died. He'd gone to London to attend an auction, if you can believe that. Genevieve spoke flippantly, yet her fingers were clenched into fists at her sides, her brow furrowed with fury. Guys, I think we should kill Arthur Langley. Just a thought. I think we should kill him. If Beggar's belief really that he should shut himself away indoors for 364 days of the year, yet the one time his wife needs him he scarpers. Talk about poor timing. His own wife was pregnant, ready to give birth at any given moment, and he didn't think to stay with her. Genevieve grit her teeth together. She looked so incensed. Letitia was momentarily fearful she would put her fist through the wall or throw a chair. Fortunately, Genevieve's temper faded just as soon as it flared up. She took several deep breaths, relaxed her shoulders, and shook her head. No, Father had no earthly clue as to my feelings. It was Rowena who had to ask him about finding me a governess, and that was only because my restlessness was starting to grate on her. Unsurprised, Father let her put out an advertisement in the first place. Oh? And why is that? Father doesn't like having strangers about the house. He says they distract him, women in particular. I think I know why, too. A thin smirk split Genevieve's pretty face in two, like a crack running down an expensive vase. Ever since poor Mother's death, he's had no way to take care of himself, so to speak. Bro doesn't know how to masturbate? Bro could just masturbate? Why are men like this? As such, he's been taking his frustrations out on the servants. He's been abusing poor Abigail for quite some time or so, I've heard. Everybody in Hatton knows about it, and I'm sure some of the folk in Beeston do too. I don't see how it could escape their notice at this point, given the state of poor Abigail. Did you not see how large her stomach is? She's the size of a cow. Now I wonder who could have caused that most miraculous transformation. I doubt very much it was the result of immaculate conception. Oh my! Letitia pressed a hand to her mouth. She could feel her face turning red again. It was practically blistering. She had wondered upon meeting Abigail whether the scullery maid was in the family way, but had tried to put such musing aside. It was indelicate to ponder such things, and in any event she would have no way of knowing. She had been content to live in ignorance. Genevieve, however, had seen fit to tear that veil asunder. The new day had brought with it surprise after surprise, and it was not even lunchtime. Now Letitia was fast beginning to fear how the day might conclude. Are you surprised? Genevieve, for her part, seemed amused by Letitia's shock. She grinned, arms behind her back, fingers linked. It's shocking, I know. Disgusting, even. I'm sorry that you have to come and work in such a house of ill repute. My father's conduct really is beyond the pale. As Genevieve tittered, Letitia found herself wincing. Though Genevieve's laughter was very pretty, it seemed wrong to laugh at so severe a matter. It wasn't at all ladylike. How... Letitia opened her mouth, paused, started again. How do you know about all of this? Everybody knows about it, like I said. I do have eyes, and ears too. I can understand that, but this is a delicate subject. You shouldn't level such accusations against your own father. It may well be a misunderstanding. Oh, please. You've been here less than a day, Letitia, so forgive me if I don't take your word as the gospel. Don't pretend that you know more about my father than I do. I never said that. I just want to wring your hands and make excuses for your new employer in case he decides to cut your allowance. Genevieve scoffed. God, you're so transparent. Well, no matter. You can cover your eyes and ears all you want, but I know the truth. I won't apologize for saying what everyone's thinking. Language, please. You shouldn't take the Lord's name in vain. You shouldn't, in fact, be speaking of such matters at all as a young lady. It's uncouth. Genevieve snorted. You wouldn't be the first person to say that. Rowena upbraids me on a regular basis as if she has a leg to stand on. She continues to make excuses for father, yet he is the one beating his servants, not me. There really is no justice in the world. Genevieve! Letitia stared at her young judge, bug-eyed, the colour quite draining from her face. You can't say that! What? Betting? Yes, that. It's highly inappropriate. Not as inappropriate as everything my father's done. If you want to scold anybody, scold him. I'm not just saying this for the sake of it, you know. I'm trying to help you. Help me? Letitia's voice was thin and constrained as she posited this question to her unruly new pupil. How are these vulgar tales going to help me exactly? You're living in Hatton Manor yourself now, don't forget. My father's already had his wicked way with poor Abigail. She didn't have the sense to get rid of the child, so she'll be sent away soon. Who's to say you won't be next? Me? Yes, you. Genevieve fixed Letitia with a steely look. Her grey eyes looked far less whimsical when paired with that furrowed brow. So cold and hard they quite took Letitia's breath away. Your clothes might be a bit plain, but you're not bad looking. I'd say you're tolerably pretty, and you're quite young too. You'd best be on your guard when you're around my father. Otherwise... Genevieve did not complete that thought, for which Letitia was grateful. But she supposed she didn't need to. Naive though she may have been when it came to matters between men and women, Letitia understood her implications only too well. Disturbed, Letitia shuddered. She could feel goose flesh erupting across her arms, and she had to fight the urge to embrace herself. What in the world would happen to her now? Busy though her day had been, Letitia found it difficult to sleep that night, no matter how she tossed and turned beneath her covers. She simply could not get comfortable. Her mind was full of thoughts which swirled about her skull like muddy water. Genevieve hadn't been at all what she had expected. But that was not the most surprising part of the day. If Genevieve's words were to be believed, Arthur Langley was not what Letitia had expected either. Letitia cast her mind back once more to the scullery maid she had met during her tour of the house. Her stomach had been subtly round, a spherical bulge visible beneath the fabric of her uniform. Given Abigail's slender arms and legs, it seemed unlikely that her rounded belly came from sneaking one too many morsels from under the cook's nose. Perhaps she really was pregnant. That had been where Letitia's own mind had first leapt upon seeing her. Could she truly be pregnant with Arthur's child, though? Arthur was the lord of the manor, the owner of Hatton. His wife had died only a year prior. It would have been most unseemly to bed another so fast, particularly one of his own servants. It was dishonourable, ungentlemanly, and disgraceful. Such behaviour would never have been tolerated in a London household. But Letitia reminded herself she was no longer in London now. She was in Yorkshire now, and the people seemed very strange, their stories stranger. And perhaps gentlemen here didn't mind wearing their shames around their necks for all to see. If Arthur had any dignity, he should have let Abigail go long before her stomach started to bulge. A mere maidservant made pregnant by her master was a great scandal. But who in the immediate vicinity would be privy to such a secret? Hatton was awfully isolated. That being the case, Arthur Langley could do as he wished, more or less unchecked. Who would stand up to him? A mere scullery maid certainly couldn't. It was strange, though, that the eagle-eyed Miss Ree had not thought to step in and resolve such an unpleasant affair. She seemed a proud, punctilious old woman, and Letitia could not imagine her meekly accepting Abigail's pregnancy. Perhaps she had tried to have Abigail ousted from her position, but Arthur had intervened. That would explain why Miss Ree had regarded Abigail with such scorn. Scorn seemed par for the course for Miss Ree, however. Though she had known her only a brief while, Letitia had fast come to this conclusion, that this was how she regarded everyone. This was an awful mess. Letitia couldn't untangle it at all. Arthur Langley had seemed a polite, well-mannered man during their brief conversation in his study. It was hard to suspect him of any gross indiscretions. Was that what he wanted? Had he been playing a role the whole time? Or was Genevieve merely mistaken? Genevieve did not seem to like her father all that much, and that was an understatement. It was possible she simply imagined the worst of him, hard proof or no, to back up her claims. It was true enough that Abigail was pregnant. That seemed indisputable. But Arthur Langley was not necessarily the babe's father. That honour could have gone to any of the young men employed at Hatton. The undergardener, for example, or even Gerard Lockett. Letitia could not imagine any woman wilfully lying with Gerard, but she had never been over fond of men herself. Perhaps he had charms that remained mysterious to her. The father could not have been Arthur Langley. It simply couldn't. That was impossible. Or was it? Fronds of ivy brushed against the window, as though asking to be let in. The wind on the moors howled mournfully, and dark shadows pooled across the floor. Though the curtains were drawn, Letitia did not feel safe. She felt anxious, on edge, as though she was being observed by dozens of demonic eyes. The moors were large enough, and there would be plenty of places for monsters to dwell, particularly on cloudy nights such as this. It was cold in Hatton Manor, and desolate, and dreadfully lonely, but there was something uncomfortably claustrophobic about Letitia's high-ceilinged bedroom. Above her head, among the warden rafters, Letitia swore she could hear scrabbling. It sounded like dozens upon dozens of tiny claws and clicking and clacking at irregular intervals. Could it be mice? Rats, maybe? Large phantom creatures populated the inside of Letitia's mind. They fed upon her anxiety and grew proportionally, their haunches bloating and distending to monstrous dimensions. One could hide a lot of secrets in a large out-of-the-way house like Hatton. A lot of demons, too. It seemed that Arthur Langley, for all his genteel affections, had more than his share of them, much more indeed than Letitia had initially known. Though Letitia's misgivings continued to swell, much like Abigail's abdomen had, the days continued to pass. That was what Letitia tried to tell herself in any event, though this was not strictly true. Time seemed to pass more slowly in Yorkshire than it had in London. During her lessons with Genevieve, who was more receptive than Letitia had feared, Letitia often found herself staring at the clock on the wall, willing it to go faster. The hours seemed slow and syrupy. They trickled by like large round droplets of honey, though Letitia's first week at Hatton could hardly be called sweet. All the same, Letitia eventually began to grow accustomed to her new surroundings. Hatton itself, and the moors that surrounded it, remained enigmatic, but Letitia's day-to-day routine was straightforward enough. She woke early at around 6:30 to wash her face and change into her clothes. Dinah would rap smartly upon her door at 7, and then Letitia would take breakfast. Usually some combination of porridge, eggs, smoked fish, and occasionally ham or bacon. After eating, Letitia would then make her way to the schoolroom. There she would glance through the musty textbooks which lined the shelves and plan out Genevieve's lessons. This she would do for half an hour or so, until Genevieve finally saw fit to put in an appearance. Miss Ree had stressed that lessons were to begin at 8 o'clock on the dot, but this was a generous estimation. Genevieve cared not for timekeeping, and she usually traipsed into the schoolroom 5, 10, sometimes 20 minutes late. I'm sorry, Miss Reed, Genevieve would chorus, hair loose, her eyes shining with impish amusement. I just had no idea what to wear, you see. I do want to make a good impression. I don't care what you wear, I'd rather you arrived on time, Letitia would chastise her. But truthfully speaking, Letitia did not much care about Genevieve's heedlessness. She was amenable enough during her lessons, and Letitia didn't want to sour their budding relationship over such small trifles. Despite the drastic change in scenery, Letitia's job remained much the same. She felt more at home in the schoolroom than anywhere else in the manor. It was there, at least, that she had some semblance of control. Genevieve was further behind in her lessons than Clara, but her reading was accomplished enough. And she was surprisingly adept at the piano for somebody who claimed to have little experience. Letitia had never been afforded the opportunity to meet Miss Langley, but the woman must have doted on her daughter. She had taught her well, even in the absence of a governess. During the mornings, Letitia would teach Genevieve of the world beyond Yorkshire, and of all England's colonies. She had told her about India and Australia, and of the wars which had been fought to claim these lands. Then in the afternoons, they would turn to French conversation, or embroidery, or art. It was their piano lessons, however, that Letitia particularly enjoyed. The piano in Hatton Manor was larger than the ones the Mortimers had owned, and more expensive. It had been in dire need of tuning. Letitia supposed it had not been used since Lady Langley's death. But Letitia had soon sorted that. The piano was a wonderful instrument made of oak, which had been manufactured by Broadwood and Sons. Transporting it all the way from London to Yorkshire must have been a great production. Perhaps it had even been a labour of love. I think this is where we will end off for the day. We'll save here. We've made quite a bit of progress, I suppose. We have met the wonderful Miss Genevieve finally, and she is gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. I hope to continue this, and hopefully we finish it before the end of October. We were sidetracked a bit by some collabs and some Laser Girl streams and illness, quite frankly. But if we're lucky, I think we can do it. It'll be nice so that we can. And thank you again to Sin and Raiders for showing up. That was very sweet of you. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing you all a lot. And we should raid as well. Let me see who's currently here. Oh, let's see. Who do we have here? Is anyone I follow currently live? Oh, Neotep is live. Neotep. She is playing Cold Front. I don't know Cold Front, but Neotep's cool. She's a chill girl. Apparently it's a visual novel. Let's get her.